It's important to understand that the purchase price refers only to the amount agreed with the owner, while the closing costs are an entirely separate amount you must have ready in cash. Now let's talk about your salary. A common question I always get is, how much do I need to earn in order to buy my first property? And for this, there's no fixed answer. But a good rule of thumb is to have a net monthly income of at least 2,500 euros. If you're single, when using ImmoScout, you can do so of course on your laptop, but you should at least at the beginning also download their app, enable push notifications, and also set up a search engine to receive notifications when new properties come online. Most German mortgages come with fixed interest periods, usually 10 years, but you can also get less or more. Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Hans and I help expats find, analyze and invest in properties here in Germany. If you're looking for individual support, you can book one-on-one sessions with me. Just check out the link in the video description or just visit germanrealty.org/services. Before we dive in, a quick announcement. I'm currently selling one of my own rental properties near Freiburg for 127,000 euros. The best part, it's even cash flow positive, and if you don't want to manage the property yourself, I'd be happy to take care of that for you. If that sounds interesting to you, visit germanrealty.org/properties for sale to learn more. Today's video is all about the basics of real estate investing in Germany. I'll walk you through the first steps you need to take in order to invest in properties here in Germany. I'll describe how much equity you need, what your salary should be, what to look for when evaluating different properties, and what to expect at each stage of the buying process. I'll talk about how you can get your financing pre-approved, and we'll also discuss how much of the purchase price you should finance and why I personally recommend financing between 90 and 100% of the purchase price, even if you do have more equity available. So whether you're planning to buy your very first property or you just moved to Germany and are curious about the opportunities here, this is your beginner-friendly guide to get started with real numbers, practical advice and zero fluff. And now let's dive right in. Let's start with the obvious question, why even invest in Germany? First, Germany offers stability and a highly regulated as well as transparent real estate market. Over here, it's a relatively low risk way to build wealth over time. On top of that, if you have a stable income and a permanent residence permit, German banks are generally happy to finance your investment. Permanent residency gives you much better conditions, not just in terms of approval chances, but also interest rates. If you don't have permanent residency, you can still get financing, but expect the bank to charge an additional, let's say 0.5 to 2% in interest as a risk buffer. Now let's talk about how much equity you need. In Germany, you can generally finance up to 100% of the purchase price, especially if this is your first property and if the numbers on the deal are strong. But in general, you'll still need to cover the closing costs on your own. Let's break that down with a real example here. Let's say you're buying a property for 100,000 euros. On top of that, you usually have to pay closing costs such as the so-called Grunderwerbsteuer or transfer tax, which is between 3.5 and 6.5% depending on each state in which your residency is. Next, you have other costs such as the Notar and Grundbuch or the Notary and the land registry office fees, which accumulate to another 1.5%. And then also oftentimes you have the Maklerkosten, or also called the broker fees, which are usually 3.57% of the purchase price. In total, that adds up to approximately between 10 and 12% of the purchase price, which means that for this 100,000 euro property, that means that you'll need between 10,000 and 12,000 euros in equity just for the closing costs. Now, there are also some banks which might also want a small buffer or some reserve funds, especially if you're buying in a riskier market or you don't have permanent residency. It's important to understand that the purchase price refers only to the amount agreed with the owner, while the closing costs are an entirely separate amount you must have ready in cash. Now, even if you have more equity available, I still recommend financing between 90 and 100% of the purchase price, because by keeping more of your capital available, you stay liquid and flexible. You can use the remaining equity for, let's say, renovations, emergencies, or also to just invest in another property. Overall, you can say leverage, if used responsibly, really helps you scale faster. Now let's talk about your salary. A common question I always get is, how much do I need to earn in order to buy my first property? And for this, there's no fixed answer, but a good rule of thumb is to have a net monthly income of at least 2,500 euros. If you're single, and this gives you enough room to cover your living expenses, manage a mortgage, and have some savings left over. If you're a couple, a combined income of between 4,000 and 5,000 euros net is generally sufficient to make your first investment work, especially if you keep your expenses low and already have some savings for the closing costs. Now, banks will then assess your income, your expenses, and the amount of equity you have available before actually giving you a loan. The more disposable income you have each month, the better your financing terms will be. And as mentioned earlier, having a permanent residence really helps here. Now let's talk about what the first steps are to get started. Step one is getting your finances organized. You need to find out how much equity you really have available, what your monthly income and your expenses are, and what you can comfortably afford to invest. Then ideally you will want to get a so-called Finanzierungsbestätigung, or a financial pre-approval, which is basically a letter from your bank or mortgage broker which indicates that they would finance you for up to a certain amount of money. As a rule of thumb, let's say you earn between, 90 to 100,000 euros. I'm sure you can get easily financed up to 400,000 euros by every major bank, which means that if you have a solid salary, you can easily buy 1, 2, maybe even 3, 4 apartments. Now, this Finanzierungsbestätigung is technically not legally binding to the bank, but it helps you to act fast when a new property becomes available or comes on the market. You can either get this Finanzierungsbestätigung before you have a good property on the table, or you can get it right after having found a suitable or good-looking apartment. To get one of these Finanzierungsbestätigungen, I recommend using a mortgage broker like the ones linked on my website, and for this you can just visit germanrealty.org/financing. Mortgage brokers like the ones listed on my website compare multiple banks and give you a broad view of your options without you needing to go to each bank individually. And also they usually provide you with the best conditions overall across all banks in Germany. They of course make a little bit of money with that by giving you this comparison and later on also the loan. However, you don't have to pay more for this service. Now, in parallel, you can start looking for properties. You can use platforms like Immobilien Scout 24, which is also the most common one in Germany, and that's also the one I mostly use myself. When using ImmoScout, you can do so, of course, on your laptop, but you should at least at the beginning also download their app, enable push notifications, and also set up a search engine to receive notifications when new properties come online. And here's the thing, the faster you are, the better deals you get. As I said in previous videos, the really good deals are going to be gone within just a few hours. And that's why it's important to set up these push notifications so that you can get in contact with the broker immediately. Now, once you found a property, make sure to run the numbers appropriately. Consider not just rent and price, but also other costs such as operating costs, the tax implications, financing conditions, potential renovations, and more. Again, if you need help with that, I offer consultations. Just let me know. Also, to run this detailed calculation, you can get my calculation spreadsheet on my website, germanrealty.org/shop. It makes running the numbers way easier. Now let's get to the next topic. What should you look for in a property? First, start simple. If you're just starting out, just look for a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment in buildings from, let's say, the 1980s all the way up to the 2000s. These properties are usually still in a good shape, and the fundamental systems such as electricity, plumbing, and insulation are still up to date. And that, of course, reduces the likelihood of expensive surprises and makes them easier to manage, especially for your first investment. Also, of course, check out whether the apartment is already rented out or whether it's vacant. If it's rented, you get immediate income, but if it's vacant, you can set a new rate or a new rent and even do minor renovations to increase its value. For this, again, make sure to check all of the relevant documentation, check the building's financials, the reserves, and whether major repairs are planned. Go through the so-called Hausgeld, the management fees, the meeting protocols, and the condition of the property thoroughly before making an investment decision. Now, once you've found a property, it's time to go back to the bank or the mortgage broker to make your mortgage official. You'll need to provide all documents such as your ID, your payslips, the properties document such as the Exposé, the rental contract, the Abrechnung, the Wirtschaftsplan, the Energieausweis, and so on. The bank will then evaluate your case and in the best case, of course, make you a binding loan offer. Most German mortgages come with fixed interest periods, usually 10 years, but you can also get less or more. This means that the interest you pay on your loan will be the same for the agreed upon years, for example, these 10 years. After that, you still have a remaining loan balance of usually around half or 3/4 of the initial purchase price. That means after those 10 years, you have to go back to a bank again. It can be the same bank or it can be a different bank and refinance your loan in order to lock in the interest rates for another period of years, let's say another 10 years. After that, your property should ideally be paid off. But that's of course dependent on your repayment rate, meaning how much of your monthly payment goes toward actually paying down the loan rather than just covering the interest. And let me explain that a bit more. When you choose a repayment rate, also called Tilgung, you're deciding how quickly you want to pay off that loan or that principal of the loan. For example, if you choose a 1% repayment rate, it means that you're initially repaying 1% of the loan if you got a 100% financing. And if you only choose this 1%, it can really take 30 or even 40 years to pay off your property completely, depending on the interest rate and the extra payments you might make. On the contrary, if you choose a higher repayment rate, let's say a 3% repayment rate, you'll pay down the loan much faster, often within 20 years. And that's why it's so important to plan ahead. The more you repay, the sooner you fully own the property. But of course, your monthly installments will be significantly higher with your higher repayment rate. Me personally, I usually choose a repayment rate between 1.5 and 2%. And I'd say that's pretty common over here in Germany. Now let's talk about the notary and the ownership transfer. Once the loan is approved, you'll sign the purchase agreement at the notary. And this is the official legal binding step here in Germany. After the notary meeting, the purchase process begins. The property gets registered in your name in the so-called Grundbuch. The payment then goes to the seller and you become the new legal owner. And that process usually takes up several weeks, sometimes even up to 2 months. Once you're the new property owner, you carry all legal obligations, but also rights, meaning you can start renting out the property. But this is also when you start paying the monthly management fees and other fees, also called the Hausgeld, to the management companies. And now lastly, let's talk about taxes. Investing in real estate and renting out properties here in Germany is really attractive in terms of tax benefits. One of the main benefits is that most expenses related to the property are tax deductible. This of course includes interest payments on your mortgage, maintenance and repair costs, property management fees, travel expenses to inspect the property, insurance premiums, and even utility costs paid on behalf of the tenant. Another major advantage is depreciation. For residential properties, you can write off the building portion of the purchase price over 50 years, or even faster if you get a so-called Restnutzungsdauergutachten. If you haven't watched that video yet, make sure to watch it here. This depreciation is deducted from your taxable rental income, even though you don't actually spend any money on it. Now, with all these deductions, your goal is then to create a taxable rental loss, meaning from a tax perspective, you show the tax agency that you're actually losing money on a yearly basis. And this then reduces your taxable income from, let's say, your main job by significant amounts. For example, last year, with all of the properties I bought recently, I made a taxable loss of around 30,000 euros. Now, since I, let's say, get a salary of 100,000 euros, my taxable income is being reduced to 70,000 euros, which means that I need to pay significantly less in taxes. And this is why real estate really makes an attractive tool for long-term wealth building and smart tax planning, especially for high earners such as expats. Over time, the combination of passive income, loan amortization, and tax savings creates a strong foundation for financial independence. Now, that was your full introduction to real estate here in Germany. We covered equity requirements, financing, what to look out for in a deal, salary expectations, and key tax benefits. If you want to get personal support with any of this except taxes, because I'm not a tax consultant, I offer consultations. If you're interested in that, just visit germanrealty.org/services. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment down below in case you have any questions. See you soon. Take care. Bye.